Greetings one and all, Super Sundays. Actually, it really is Sunday this time. Sometimes, you get lucky. We are on the 9th day of Adar 5785 from the Holy Land, the Holy City, Elon Moreh Shechem, right next to my holy yeshiva, which you saw for half a minute or so at the beginning. It's been decorated for the festive holiday of Purim. You see in the middle there, the tanks are ready to annihilate the enemies of Israel. May we see it speedily in our times today. Okay, once again, this class is for the sake of heaven, to remove the divine presence from the exile, to improve ourselves. One small step, one big step for mankind in our difficult days. Number two, gratitude. Shout out to our holy channel, Mike's channel, Voice of Judea. All the great things Mike and the volunteers do all over Israel, every inch of the Holy Land. It is an honor to be on their channel. Last but definitely not least, the super blog, Palm Tree of Deborah, oneword.com. Check it out if you have time, or if you don't have time, make time worth your time. Okay, today, with Hashem's help, for some reason, Hashem has sent me this class. And it's an eye-opener. It's really pretty shocking, as you will see. You think about how many classes you've heard on Tanit Esther. To use the word shocking, I don't think we've ever heard such a connection, but this is really amazing. This is well worth our time. Okay, so without any further ado, let's begin. Tanit Esther, the fast of Esther, is on the 13th day of Adar. Now this is very unusual. First of all, the fast of Esther is definitely an exception to the rule of our other fasts during the year, which are all, of course, surrounded by the idea of the destruction of the land of Israel, destruction of our holy temple first and second. But this really is unusual, because the fast of Esther, contrary to public opinion, was not held on the 13th day of Adar. It was held in the middle of Nisan, a month later. So the question arises, why in the world are we fasting on the 13th day of Adar, and we're calling it the fast of Esther, when the original fast did not take place in the month of Adar? For example, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef brings down in his Jewish law book 12 reasons why we commemorate the fast of Esther. When you hear so many reasons, there's something really, really big happening under the scenes. We might say, instead of calling it the fast of Esther, we could call it the fast of Hester, which means hidden. There's something undercurrent that is happening big time on the 13th day of Adar, the fast of Esther. So let's delve right into this mystery of the undercurrent, what is really happening behind the scenes. Okay, now, according to many opinions, Haman chose a month, not a specific date, by lots, throwing lots. He chose a month where he thought that it was a bad month for the Jewish people. So he sees the month of Adar, and Adar, he knew that it was the death of Moses, our teacher, was on the 7th day of Adar. This would be a perfect day for annihilating the Jewish people. In parentheses, an amazing idea. Many people might ask, how was he such a knowledgeable Jew? If we went out and did a survey today, most religious Jews would not know that Moses passed away in the month of Adar, or the 7th day of Adar. So the answer is very simple, that Haman worked in the house of Mordechai. And therefore, when you work in a house of a religious Jew, you learn a lot of Jewish laws. There's a great story that I heard from a very popular rabbi in Israel. His name is Rabbi Baruch Rosenblum. He said a couple of times he's been invited to old age homes. And you know, when you get into old age home, it's like 100 degrees inside, and people are still wearing jackets over there, because when you don't move, it's like when you go to sleep, you get really cold. So I remember my uncle of blessed memory, Martin Goodman. He used to come into my grandmother's house in LA, and he would say, "Mary," it's my grandma's name, "it's a cool 89 degrees in your house." I used to love that line. So Rabbi Rosenblum goes on to tell that usually after a couple of minutes, the population of the old age home, they usually fall asleep because of the heat in the room. The only people awake are the assistants from India or from the Philippines. And he'll continue talking, and he'll bring, for example, a law on the Sabbath. And a couple of people, a couple of the non-Jewish Philippine or Indian assistants will raise their hand and say, "But we learned in another class that was here by another rabbi, he told us that on Sabbath this is permitted or not permitted." That's an amazing thing. So when you work with a Jewish population, you know a lot of the insights. So that's how Haman knew. He worked in the home of Mordechai. Okay. So, according to our sages, Haman picks the month of Adar because of the fact that Moses passed away in the month of Adar. Also, he saw that the zodiac sign for the Jewish people was negative for the Jewish people. Okay. How does he pick the 13th day? I could understand you pick the first day, the head of the month. Everything is connected to the most important. The DNA of everything is in the head, is in the source. So if you want to really blow away the Jewish people, annihilate them, pick the first day. Or maybe the 7th day, when Moses passed away. How did he come up with the 13th day? Well, we have 5 all-stars, 5 Jewish sages all-star that tell us an amazing line, amazing story here. Haman knew that 80% of the Jews in Egypt, during the time that the Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt, decided not to leave Egypt and go up to the land of Israel at the time of the Exodus. And these 80% of the Jewish people, an amazing number, they were eliminated during the plague of darkness in order that there should not be a desecration of God's name where the Egyptians would be parting. We know that in Israel, for example, if there is an attack, an Arab-Muslim attack against the Jewish people, the Arabs hand out candies in the major cities. It happens in East Jerusalem and happens, of course, in Arab cities, all over the land. So in order that they should not celebrate the downfall of the Jewish people, God brought on the darkness plague, so they didn't know what was happening. This, we are told, by these 5 all-star opinions, I'll get to their names in a minute, this occurred on the 13th and 14th and 15th day of Adar. The opening ceremony was on the 13th day of Adar. So therefore, Haman knew this privy information, and he decided that this would be this would be the greatest date to annihilate the Jews. Now this is an amazing, how certain was he? Don't forget, this throwing of the lots is taking place in the month of Nisan. To annihilate the Jewish people in Adar is 11 months later. If you're on a roll, you don't want to stop it. You don't want to call a timeout on the court. You want to hit the iron when it's hot. He was so certain that he was on track. He had picked the greatest month to annihilate the Jewish people. He had picked the greatest date, the 13th, when 80% of the Jews refused to leave Egypt and go up to the land of Israel, that he was willing to take the risk of waiting 11 more months. Anything could happen. No problem. He was 100% certain. These 5 all-star opinions are the Chida in a few of his books. I'll name one. In Chomat Tanakh, in the book of Exodus, the portion of Bo, chapter 10, verse 22. The Rokeach, Rabbi Eliezer of Germaiza, in his commentary on the Torah, Exodus, portion of Bo, also ditto 1022. Manot HaLevi by Rabbi Shlomo Alkovitz, the composer of the Lecha Dodi prayer that we say at the beginning of Shabbat, on his commentary to the scrolls of Esther, page 111. Eliyahu Rabbah, Code of Jewish Law. This is a law codifier. He brings this down as being the reason why Haman chose the day of the 13th, based on the information that we just talked about, the 80%. This is brought down in Orach Chaim 693-2. Last but not least, the Khatam Sofer, in his talks on page 200, side A. Check that out. After this shocking information that the day of annihilation of the Jewish people was chosen when 80% of the Jews were annihilated in Egypt, the question should arise to all of us. Say what? 80% of the Jewish people? It's like millions of people. Why isn't there a memorial to commemorate this Holocaust of the Jewish people of Egypt? We have a memorial day for Holocaust Day. 80% of the Jews being wiped out. To compound this question, why don't we have a fast day commemorating this event? To compound this, we have a fast day either on the 7th or 17th of the month of Elul, the 6th month in the Jewish calendar. This is brought down in the Code of Jewish Law, Orach Chaim, chapter 580, law number 2. When the spies and the generation of the desert, when they were annihilated during the 40-year period that the Jews wandered in the desert, all Jews, males, between the ages of 20 and 60 at that time were wiped out during those years. And we have a fast, a yearly fast. It's not obligatory. It's a volunteer fast, but it exists. And if we do the math of how many Jews died during that 40-year period, we don't reach the level of the 80% that didn't leave Egypt. So a person might say, well, listen, it's very simple. The reason why we commemorate the fall of the spies and their generation, which were wiped out in the desert, and not the 80% that were wiped out in Egypt before the wandering in the desert began, is because that the spies were righteous. And the 80% that chose to stay, they were wicked. Now, it is true that Rashi and the Midrash Rabbah do use the expression the wicked or transgressors when it comes to the 80%. And we know that Rashi brings down source that the spies were righteous people. So maybe that's the difference. However, not good. That doesn't hold water because of the fact that we have, for example, the Mechilta, and we have the Tanchuma that bring down that they do not use the language of wicked or transgressors. So therefore, we can't say that is the difference. So that's number one. So we might say that the intentions of the spies compared to the intentions of the 80%, the spies had lofty intentions, and perhaps the 80%, they might not have been wicked, they might not have been transgressors, but however, they did not have any lofty reasoning for staying in Egypt. So therefore, we have to rule out this one also. Comes the Tiferet Yonatan, Rav Yonatan Eifshitz, and he hits the ball out of the ballpark. He says in his commentary on the Torah, Book of Numbers, portion of Shlach, he writes the following, that the spies knew the prophecy of Eldad and Medad, that Moses would die and Joshua would lead the Jewish people into the land of Israel. Therefore, in order to keep Moses alive and have the influence and learn the Holy Torah from Moses, our teacher, they wanted us, on purpose, they said, let's not go into the land of Israel, because once they would go into the land of Israel right away, then Moses would pass away. And therefore, they wanted to delay that for as many years as possible. So that was their reason behind not coming into the land of Israel. So could it be that also the 80%, just like we see from Rabbi Yonatan Eifshitz, that the spies had a holy reason why they were wrong, but they had a holy reason why that they should not go into the land of Israel in order to keep their holy teacher around Moses? And then, yes, amazingly, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, one of the great rabbis of America, in his book, Emet LeYaakov, a commentary on the Torah, Exodus 10:22, I summarize what he writes. We see that when the Jews arrived at the sea, an argument erupted in the heavens. Why should the sea split for the Jews? They were idol worshippers. They were sinners, just like the Egyptians. Why should the Egyptians be drowned and killed, and the Jews, who are on the same spiritual level, be allowed to survive? So therefore, the question arises, this was, remember, we're talking about a week after the Exodus. They arrive at the water. These are the good guys. These are not the 80%. These are the 20% that got out of Egypt. So if they're also considered to be wicked, and there's a gigantic dispute going on in the heavenly worlds, should the Jewish people be allowed to be saved because they're wicked? Why weren't the Jews just annihilated in Egypt? What is the difference between the group of the 80% and 5 weeks later, the Jews of the sea? That's the difference, 5 weeks. As we said, the plague of darkness is when the 80%, a month later was the last plague of the firstborn, and then we got out of Egypt, and a week later we were on the Red Sea. So he says an amazing lesson. He says that the reason is that the 80%, they influenced others. The difference between the 20% that left Egypt and the 80% did not is a very big difference. The 80%, they were influencing anyone they could speak with to tell them, listen, what happened to the tribe of Ephraim that left Egypt 30 years earlier is exactly going to happen to us if we leave, because now is not the time. You see, dear friends, there are so many ways to calculate the exodus of Egypt. That could be a separate class. It's really, really an amazing subject that God gives us really a lot of opportunities depending on our actions or non-actions. So they were, the 80%, they were people that were influencing. They were the movers. They were the teachers of the Jewish people. And therefore, they were destroyed. The 20% that left, they were not righteous people either, as we see the the dispute in heavens. However, they left Egypt and they did not try to influence people to stay in the land of Egypt. So this is an amazing lesson by Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, that they had an ideology behind this. It is not time to leave the exile and go up to the land of Israel, and therefore they stayed. Wow. Okay. Thus, we have an amazing, amazing new idea that the fast of Esther on the 13th day of the month of Adar, the reason, or one of the reasons behind the fast, is to commemorate the 80% of Jews that were left because they believed that they made a mistake, but they believed that they were correct when they said the time is not appropriate to leave Egypt. So they were not, okay? Therefore, we commemorate the 80% that did not leave Egypt on when? On the 13th day of Adar, every single year. So that comes out amazing that we have on the 7th or 17th of Elul, we commemorate the spies and the generation 20 to 60 years old that were eliminated, were wiped out during the 40 years of wandering in the desert. We commemorate that day by a voluntary fast, and we have 80% of the Jewish people that did not want to leave Egypt. They did not want to leave Egypt, and we commemorate their tragedy on the 13th day of Adar. Now, this is an amazing story just to close this part off, that I was not sure if this idea of the fast of the 13th day of Adar was my own idea, if I heard it from other rabbis, or if I read it, if I learned it from a book, different books. I was not sure, because it was a while ago that this idea came to me. So I wasn't sure. So I didn't feel comfortable to get in front of everybody here and say, hear my own idea. But this is an amazing thing. Yesterday, I was up north in a city called Harish, and I went to a certain synagogue to pray the afternoon prayers, and they were just about to finish. The afternoon prayers. So I thought that they were starting later. So I was thinking, what am I going to do now? So I went to another synagogue. There I see on the shelf, they have the books, all the books of the Chida. So I open up the book of the Chida on Exodus 10:22, and unbelievable, right there in black and white, the Chida writes that the reason why we have the fast of Esther is to commemorate the 80% of the Jewish people that did not leave Egypt. Whoa, that was like, you can't make up this story why I missed the afternoon prayers in one synagogue in order to go to a different synagogue, and they happened to have the books of the Chida, and I just happened to open one to that place. Wow, this was celebration for me. Okay, we're continuing here, not holding any punches. That's the first idea. That's an amazing idea. Okay, now the timeline. Fast forward to the time of Purim. How much time has elapsed since we said Haman is looking at the appropriate date to annihilate the Jewish people? He picks the 13th day because this was the opening of the 3-day period of darkness where the 80% of the Jews were annihilated. This was the greatest time, just like once the Jews were annihilated on this day. It's going to happen again. He was so certain of this that he was willing to wait 11 months. He was certain that this was truth. So what's the timeline here? Very simple. We're talking about approximately 960 years had passed since Haman looked at the appropriate date to annihilate the Jews of Persia, and the story of the Jews in Egypt that refused to leave Egypt to go up to the land of Israel. 960 years. What is the count? The count is 1 month. Okay, 1 month till the last plague. So we have 1 month, and then we have 40 years wandering in the desert. So we have 40 years and a month. And then we have the Jewish people were in the land of Israel built the temple. Temple existed and destroyed. That was another 850 years. And then we have 70 years approximately, a little bit less, that passed since the story of Purim. So we're talking about 960 years. So, my gosh, why is Haman putting all of his money, so to speak? He is betting his last dime that this is the time to annihilate the Jewish people. 960 years have passed, buddy. You know, why do you think you're going to incite God to revisit upon the Jewish people in Persia 960 years later a sin of the 80% that did not want to leave Egypt and go up to the land of Israel? What in the world is going on here? It seems totally bizarre and somewhere out of space, maybe where somewhere on Mars, and Mr. Musk is hanging out. We have a principle. We have a verse in the Torah that tells us in Exodus 33:7 that God visits the iniquities of the previous generations on the present generations. However, we have another verse in Deuteronomy 24:16. This is the exact opposite. Every person is accountable for their own transgressions. No one's going to pay the price for the fact that A or B sinned. So make up your mind. So therefore, in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, page 27b, we have these two verses that seem to be contradictory. And then we're told very simply that if the present generations are returning on the sins and transgressions of previous generations, they will pay the price of what previously happened. It will become one account, and you don't want to be bankrupt like that. However, if the present generation has divorced itself, has gone on a new path, they do not repeat the transgressions, the falling, the sinning of the previous generations, nothing will happen. Everyone has their own account. So what's going on in the story of Purim that Haman is putting his money? He is betting on the fact that God is going to be incited here to annihilate the Jewish people. God is going to agree with the decree of Haman, something that happened 960 years ago, that Jews in Egypt did not want to leave. What is the connection 960 years later to Jews sitting in Persia? Or is there a connection? Is this a repeat of the same type of transgression? Whoa! Let's go forward. Okay. What were the sins? In our sources, what are the sins that brought upon this prosecution against the Jewish people that it seemed that God agreed to the possibility of annihilation of the Jewish people. This is serious. This is men, women, children. This is across the board. So the Talmud in Tractate Megillah, page 12, side A, tells us two sins. That 70 years before, the Jewish people had bowed down to the idols of the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar. Another opinion there on the same page is that the Jews participated in the feast, that in the beginning of the scrolls of Esther, we are told that there was a feast that Achashverosh, during his third year of reign, he threw a party for 180 days. That was some hell of a party he was doing. Also, his wife Vashti had a 7-day party for the women. So those are two reasons of the Talmud. We have the Midrash Rabbah in Esther Rabbah 7, chapter 7, paragraph 25, tells us actually it was the selling of Joseph that the Jewish people were revisiting, were repeating the same mistakes of hatred towards other Jews during this time of the Purim story. So therefore, that iniquity was brought, regurgitated. And last but not least, in Breshit Rabbati on page 167, we have an idea that the reason why the Jewish people almost were annihilated because they lost hope to be redeemed. They did not believe in the coming of the Messiah and coming of redemption. So now we have the holy task of connecting two reasons, fusing two reasons into one, and seeing how the same transgression of the 80%, 960 years previously, was once again reignited in the time of the story of Purim. Whoa! So we're taking two reasons. Number one, the Jewish people participating in the feast of King Achashverosh, the king of Persia. And number two, losing hope to be redeemed, fusing those two reasons to become one. Okay, now we have a verse at the beginning of Esther, chapter 1, verse 4. It says, the king showed off to the population his wealth and treasures. And our sages explain to us Esther Rabbah, chapter 2, paragraph 1. What was he showing off? What treasures? What part of his wealth was he showing the Jewish people? Amazing idea. Two ideas. Temple artifacts. He was bringing the clothes that the priest would wear in the time of the temple. That once the Persians conquered the Babylonians, of course, they destroyed the first temple and they exiled the Jewish people. So once the Persians came around with King Cyrus, they regained all of the temple artifacts. So they used this during the 100-day and 80-day party and also for the women. Another wild treasure was the meals of the land of Israel. Say what? Now, it's not clear that when he was showing off his treasures and wealth, and he was showing off the meals of the land of Israel, were these foods from the land of Israel that he was distributing at the festive meals? Or was this to remind us it was produce from his kingdom, but it reminded people of the meals of the land of Israel. I remember one time my grandfather took a trip to the land of Israel in his life, one time. And he said, well, whenever there would be like a lot of vegetables on his plate, he would say, I remember in Israel when I was at the hotels, that breakfast of Israel, well, there was tons and tons of salad. This reminds me of it. Whoa. Yeah, Grandpa. Okay, so this 180-day bash was to celebrate the downfall of the Jewish temple, the first Jewish temple. This was a party to celebrate the destruction of the land of Israel, of not returning to the land of Israel, no redemption for the Jewish people, no returning to the land of Israel, no rebuilding of the temple. Whoa, how many Jews attended this party? This was just in the city of Shushan, where the dignitaries of the Jewish people, the important ones, the leaders of the Jewish people, sat in the city of Shushan. I think today it's called Susa in Iran. 18,500 people attended this party for their downfall. That is amazing. How can you participate? How can you sit down when they're celebrating no more land of Israel, no more temple, no more redemption for the Jewish people? You're cooked. You're finished. Whoa. But amazingly, also the modest 7-day party of Vashti for women. Okay? It also tells us, our sages tell us that this is in Esther Rabbah, chapter 3, paragraph 9. It tells us she too gave meals of the land of Israel to the women. And she also dressed up in the clothes of the priests of the temple, of the Jewish temple. So it was the same idea, also by the men, also by the women, that you are not going to be redeemed. There is no redemption for you. There is no returning to the land of Israel, and there is no temple in the future for you all. Now, the holy Rabbi Pinchas Menachem Eliezer of Pilz, he has a book. It's called Siftei Tzadik. He writes, volume 2, it's a 6-volume work. On page 156, I summarize. This is also brought down in various books, like, for example, the Sfat Emet brings it down on the holiday of Purim. So he writes the following. What was behind the king's bringing the people meals of the land of Israel? And here's his answer. Based on the Holy Zohar, Exodus, page 152, side B. When the Jews are doing God's will, all of Israel's sustenance comes from the land of Israel. Anything, the leftovers, the hand-me-downs, go to outside the land of Israel. However, if the Jews are not conducting themselves properly, transgressing, Israel's sustenance then comes from outside the land of Israel. Achashverosh, this is all in the book Siftei Tzadik. He writes, Achashverosh's message, the king of Persia's message to the Jewish people was, just like we destroyed the land of Israel and the temple, today the sustenance, the blessing is no longer in the temple, is no longer in the land of Israel. It is here. Here, we are here. Now Persia is the land of Israel. It's the new Jerusalem. Whoa! He's really hit it out of the stadium there. Okay, now, Daniel, we are told by our sages in Shira Shirim Rabbah, chapter 5, paragraph 4, Daniel Daniel did not forget the land of Israel. He did not forget Jerusalem and the temple. Look at his prayer, for example, chapter 9, Daniel, the book of Daniel, chapter 9, verses 16, 17, 18. These are prayers that we say every Monday, every Thursday. He was so connected to the land of Israel, to the temple of Israel in Jerusalem. Listen to this. When King Cyrus of Persia declared that the Jews could no longer go up to the land of Israel, Daniel and his company, they stated the following: it is best that we go up to the land of Israel. Listen to the words, amazing words, to partake in the meals of the land of Israel and bless on the land of Israel. The same exact expression that the wicked King Ahasuerus used, the wicked Princess Vashti, they gave 18,500 Jews and everybody else, they gave them the meal of the land of Israel, saying there is no longer a need for the land of Israel. You will not return to the land of Israel. Here is the new Israel. You know, also the Christians, they have the replacement. We are the new Israel. They call themselves. Yuck, yuck, yuck. So this was the original replacement theory way before Christianity hit the world. So this is an amazing line. Daniel, it's forbidden to go up to the land of Israel. Daniel calls his followers and they say, we're going to go against this illegitimate, this abomination law of not allowing Jews to return to the land of Israel. They understand. Daniel understood that to fix the abomination, the transgression, the desecration of God's name of 18,500 people participating in a festive for 6 months, representing the downfall of the land of Israel, the downfall of the Jewish people, no redemption, no temple for you. He understands that we must fix this sin, and he goes up to the land of Israel, and he tells us that the blessing has returned to the land of Israel. Cyrus was, so to speak, a messenger of God. That's what he's called. He's a messenger of God. He's telling us that the blessing has begun to return to the land of Israel. Whoa! Daniel, my brother, as the song goes. Connecting again these 960 years that have passed, the 80% that refused to leave Egypt, to go up to the land of Israel, and the Jews during the time of the Purim story in Persia that are celebrating, are participating in a celebration of their own downfall, of the destruction of the temple, destruction of redemption of the land of Israel. Our sages tell us that if the Jews of Babylonia, which was conquered afterwards by Persia, would have returned to the land of Israel in mass, the second temple would never have been destroyed. Do we hear the words? If we would have returned in mass, but the Jewish people returned trickle here, a trickle there, as we will soon see, God willing. This could be found in Shir HaShirim Rabbah, chapter 8, paragraph 11, or in the tractate Yoma, page 9, side B. So folks, Haman, he hits the jackpot here. Though the 80% of Egypt were killed on the 13th day of Adar, 960 years previously, the Jews of Persia, once again, who were under Babylonian rule for almost 70 years, this triggered and awakened the sin of the 80%, because what was happening at the present was exactly the same sin. is the reluctancy of the Jewish people to leave and go up to the land of Israel. The same exact. Haman sees the Jewish people participating in these festive meals. He sees the Jewish people going and being served meals of the land of Israel of blessed memory, and the temple dressing up artifacts of the temple of blessed memory and redemption of blessed memory. It ain't going to happen again. And they're participating in this desecration of God's name in their own downfall. So he understood this. He wasn't going to bet all of his money and his word and wait 11 months if it wasn't for the fact that the Jews of Persia had fallen into the same trap of the 80% of Egypt. Whoa. So let's take a quick look at Cyrus's proclamation and the Jews' reaction, or better, non-reaction. Let's take a look. Okay, Cyrus conquers Babylonia and he frees the Jews from the status of slaves. Cyrus declares the right of the Jewish people to return and build a temple. This occurred approximately 47 years after the destruction of the first temple. There were 4 waves of coming up, 4 groups coming up to the land of Israel, at different stages. The first group, right after the proclamation of Cyrus, was a leader of the Jewish people named Sheshbatzar. He went up with approximately 1,000 Jews to ascend to Israel after the proclamation of Cyrus. The next wave was Zerubbabel. This was 1 year later after the Cyrus proclamation. 42,360 Jews go up to the land of Israel 1 year later. And then comes the king, the new king of Persia, the Achashverosh, and he places a ban along with Cyrus to continue going up to the land of Israel and to continuing building the temple. This went on for approximately 14 years during the reign of Achashverosh. Afterwards, 20 years after the proclamation of Cyrus, once again, the going up to the land of Israel, rebuilding the temple continues by the son of Achashverosh. His name was Darius. 5,000 people go up with the holy spiritual leader, Ezra, 5,000 people. And 13 years later, which is 33 years after the proclamation of Cyrus, Jews go up with Nehemiah. Not clear how many ascended, but our numbers speak approximately of 42 to 50,000 Jews went up when they were allowed to go up to the land of Israel. This was a tiny minority. The majority of the Jewish people, and of course the majority of the teachers, the educated, who came up to the land of Israel? The low class came up to the land of Israel. The majority who had money, sounds familiar, who had riches, they refused to come up to the land of Israel. They caused, instead of the redemption coming and the temple continuing forever, we are 2,000 years later in this exile because of our refusal to come up to the land of Israel during the time of the end of the Babylonian and the beginning of the Persian exile. So, dearest friends, where do we see in the story of Esther and the scrolls, where do we see that the Jewish people tried to fix this sin And there's an amazing answer. We are told in the Babylonian Talmud, we are told in Tractate Megillah, page 2, side A, any city surrounded by walls since the time of Joshua will read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar, similar to the people of Shushan during the time of the miracle, that Shushan was a walled city, and therefore any city that was surrounded by walls from the time of Joshua would celebrate like they did in Shushan, a walled city, on the 15th. It does not give us, the Babylonian Talmud does not give us a connecting reason. What is the connection to Joshua and the story of Purim? But we have the privy inside information from Jerusalem Talmud. Okay, applause here. Chapter 1, Law 1. Listen to this, amazing. The land of Israel was desolate during the time of Purim, after being destroyed by the Babylonians 70 years previously, almost. Therefore, our sages wanted to give honor to the land of Israel and tell us any city that had a wall at the time of Joshua would read like they did in Shushan on the 15th. If this enactment was not instituted, the land of Israel would have suffered humiliation. They would be reading even cities that were previously before the destruction of the land of Israel, before the destruction of the temple, before the destruction of the land of Israel, they would be reading on the 14th like opened cities. So that would be an embarrassment. There would be no difference from the open cities to the previously walled cities of the land of Israel. So our sages wanted to give honor to Jerusalem, honor to the land of Israel, and therefore, who more than anyone else represents conquering the land of Israel, settling the land of Israel? Joshua, for 7 years, he conquered the land of Israel. For 7 years, he settled the land of Israel. Who more represents the settling of the land of Israel more than Joshua? So here, folks, we have it right in front of us on a silver platter. Within the story, we are repenting for the fact that we attended that disgraceful party for 180 days, women for 7 days, where we are commemorating the downfall of the land of Israel. No hope for redemption, no hope to rebuild the temple. And here we are uplifting the land of Israel once again as if there are walled cities, okay, when Israel at that time was almost desolate. No, but we must repent. We must repent on this point of giving honor to the land of Israel. And therefore, we have this important law that was instituted. So to summarize this present by God, summarize what we learned today. Go over it again. Number 1, we learned that one of the reason behind the 13th day of Adar, the fast of Esther, was the 80% of Jews in Egypt that were wiped out on the 13th day of Adar during the Exodus, right before the Exodus of Egypt, because they did not want to go up to the land of Israel. Therefore, once a year we commemorate their fall, of these millions that were destroyed during the plague of the darkness, which took place on the 13th day of Adar. Number 1. Number 2, why did Haman choose the 13th day of Adar to annihilate the Jewish people? That is, Haman understood this was a trigger to revisit the transgression of the 80% on the 13th day of Adar that did not want to leave Egypt for the land of Israel. And he understood this would be a trigger. This would revisit the iniquities of the transgression of the present day, the present generation Jews of Persia, attending the party for their own downfall of the land of Israel, of the temple, no redemption, forgetting the land of Israel. That would be the greatest trigger and a prosecution against the Jewish people, that nothing has changed. Just like in Egypt, they forgot the land of Israel, etc., and preferred to stay outside the land of Israel. It's happening again in our times, in the times of Haman, in the times of the king of Ahasuerus. Amazing. And folks, most of all, this is a frightening warning to all of our dear brothers and sisters, the Jews of the diaspora, so-called diaspora today, who have once again chosen the land of Israel has been opened. There was not the proclamation of Cyrus, but the proclamation, the Balfour Proclamation in 1921. It's been over 100 years. The land of Israel is open. We could come with all our wealth, with all our belongings, come to the land of Israel. How long will those gates remain open? So that is a frightening wake-up call for all our brothers and sisters who choose to remain outside the land of Israel, who have really forgotten the central point of the land of Israel in Judaism. So therefore, remembering these three important lessons, this is an amazing awakening call to spend some time on the 13th, also during Purim, the next day or the next 2 days, and to go over where do we stand when it comes to the land of Israel, comes to redemption. Are we part of the process? Are we helping? Or we're waiting for a miracle, maybe for some wings to take us to the land of Israel? Where do we stand on the question of redemption of the temple, rebuilding of the temple, and returning to the land of Israel? Have a meaningful Purim.